Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of What Drives You. I am Stan Windhorn, and with me, as always, or pretty much as always, is my co-host, Carl Bauer.
Thank you, Stan. How's your day going?
My day's going good. I'm excited about our guest today, Carl. This is a gentleman I got to know, gosh, I don't know how many years ago it was, but Ed and I have worked together on a lot of projects when I was there at TrueCar and he was there as a consultant. So just kind of fill everybody in on a little bit about Mr. Ed French is he's been in the automobile space for a long time. He's been a general manager, a dealer principal. Um, he's probably best known as an automotive consultant with his company called Auto Profit, which is Profit. But Ed's used to me saying this. In my opinion, it should be Auto Profit, Prophet, because I don't know anybody who really understands the business quite the way Ed does. Ed French, welcome to What Drives You. We appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have this time with both you and Carl. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be great.
Well, Carl, I know I told you a little bit about this, but when Ed was consulting with TrueCar and I was doing a lot of presentations, I always look forward to the times where Ed and I were on the same speaking card. I thought we made a really excellent
Yeah.
one-two punch. And then we also, Ed had a quarterly report that he would do for TrueCar to be passed out to our dealer customers. It was called the editorial, which I don't know
Yeah.
who came up with that one, but I love that.
Yeah.
But then Ed and I would do an interview like this to kind of go over editorial. Who did come up with that name, editorial, Ed?
Uh, Brett Barron.
Doesn't surprise me. Doesn't
Yeah.
surprise me.
Yeah.
Good guy, Brett Barron.
Yeah.
All right, so Ed, I know a lot about what you're doing now. You and I have worked together a lot over the
Right.
years, but I kind of want to go back to sort of the beginning. How old were you when you first got involved in the auto business?
Well, working for a paycheck,
Hmm.
my first paycheck from an retail automobile dealership was when I was 14 years old.
Wow.
So before I was legally able to even get a paycheck, I was getting a paycheck
What was that first job?
I was washing cars
Yeah.
at a Rambler dealership. That morphed into AMC. So if
Uh-huh.
that sets the Wayback Machine pretty far. But that was my first paycheck.
So you right out of the gates as a young man, you went right into automotive.
Yeah, it was an interesting. I was grew up with just my sister and myself. My father was an educator, principal of an elementary school for 40 some years. My mother was in journalism, worked for the local newspaper and had her own editorial page. It was interesting, Stan. I grew up um, next door to a complete car nut, and two doors down was a similar car nut. Now, remember, this was in the 50s. I'm 71. So, when you're 5 or 6 years old, it's still, it's not even 1960 yet.
Yeah.
When cars and culture of cars was everything. And so here was this 5 and 6 year old kid going to the next door. That's when you knew your neighbors too. That's the other thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'd go next door to the neighbors and they were working on cars, and you'd go to the other side of the street and the neighbors were working on cars and they had friends over. And this is when you did all the work yourself. And so the garages were full of these young guys were 15, 16, 17 years old. I'm 5.
Yeah.
And so it just sort of it happened somewhat naturally.
I
It's
can imagine when
interesting.
you're 5 and you're looking at a 15-year-old, that person is so old and wise at that
Yeah.
stage. They become your
And
hero, don't they?
yeah, they immediately became my heroes. It was
Yeah.
interesting. My mother took a picture of me for my first day of kindergarten, and I had a car pinned on my shirt with my name on it. So it sort of tells you I was predisposed to be in the car business, I guess.
It was your destiny.
Yeah,
It
I
was your
guess.
destiny.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
but
awesome.
from a family history, my family was not in the car business. So, a lot of folks today, their families passed it on to them. I got it through being lucky enough to be on a street full of drag racers. So if that's any blessing, can be called a curse, but I'm calling it a blessing as I look back on it. So that's how it actually started. And the one neighbor married the daughter of one of the partners in this Rambler AMC dealership. And so, I'm 8 or 9 years old. I'm riding with him to go hang out at the car dealership. So that it just happened naturally. That I guess stand to answer the question.
Yeah. So what transition was it from just washing cars? Did you make your way into the sales thing before management? Did you
No,
take that
actually,
path?
I took an unorthodox pathway.
Okay.
Um, Again, this was these young men were hardcore. They
Hmm.
were drag racers, uh, midgets, sprint cars. I mean, these were hardcore folks. My dad even thought about moving because to
Oh,
try to
wow.
get
Okay.
me away from these guys.
Gotcha.
Uh, but by the age of 14 or 15, I had, you know, race cars, and I was riding in the truck towing cars to US 30 drag strip in Chicago and Indianapolis Raceway Park. And I mean, I'd get out of school and immediately go work on a car somewhere. So
Mhm.
my pathway was unorthodox. Um, in I ended up starting in the workplace as a technician. That's where I
Okay.
actually started, which is an interesting way to end up where I ended up, because that's not generally the known pathway. It's normally through sales.
Yeah, you're right. In fact, I didn't know that about you. It was
Yeah,
interesting because I almost made the comment. I've heard plenty of people who said they got started in the automobile industry at a young age and they started off by washing cars and then
yeah,
that thing. But usually
yeah,
to get where you are, you went through the sales path, not through the service path.
yeah. No, I went through the service path. I ended up as a service technician. Then I went part time as I was going to college. Um, Got married young. Ended up going to school part time, and then ended up as a full time technician. I worked on transmissions at a Buick Cadillac store. if that
Okay.
if you can believe that. I'm ripping the transmissions out of a 1973 Buick Electra 225 and rebuilding them. So it's been a long, strange trip, but
Yeah. Well,
it's
cars were a lot easier to work on back
a
then, though,
heck
weren't
of a
they?
lot easier. Yeah, no computers. No, we didn't have computers. We had really smart guys that could understand the sound of an engine. It's a
Right.
lost art.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, Stan. I thought about this morning as in anticipation of this. You have to. I had three people in my work life that believed in me and saw something in me that others didn't see. And frankly, one of those people was in that Buick store. He was the general manager of that Buick store. And he said, you're better than this. You need to think about getting into the fixed operations management side of it. And,
Okay.
he believed in me, and I didn't even believe in myself. I was happy to, eat peanut butter sandwiches out of my lunchbox with, Buell Hibbs, who was next to me in the next stall over.
Yeah.
Um, but he saw something in me that I didn't see, and he actually really encouraged me to think about becoming a service advisor, and what the benefits of getting out of just working on cars would be. And um, I credit him with the initial jumping off point, because there was an opening in that store, and they mentored me along, and had a service manager that believed in me as well. Um, the You got a general manager and a service manager that believe in you.
Yeah.
boy, you can go a lot. You can go a lot of places, and
Let me ask you a
that was the
question
jumping
about
off
that,
point.
Ed.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, let me ask you about that. So you had these people, one in particular, who saw something and you said you didn't even see it yourself, and that
Didn't.
was the launching pad to get you to bigger and better things.
Right.
Has that been a lesson that you've used now as a leader and an owner? And I don't know how many people you've had work for you over the years, but was that
Absolutely.
something that you've carried with you?
Never forgotten it. I've always looked for that person that uh, I saw talent in that maybe they didn't see themselves.
Mhm.
And Stan, I have hundreds of folks that I've helped along in my career that are, I just got a text message the other day from one of them that said, I just wanted you to know how much it meant to have you help me further my career. Those kinds of things. Money can't buy those. And I've never forgotten it. And I've been lucky enough to have three of them.
Yeah.
Most people are only lucky enough to have one. I had three. And
The,
boy,
the
that
true
just,
long tail benefit of that is somebody did it for you.
yep,
Now you've done it for others, and most
yep,
likely they're going to do it
yeah,
for someone else. It's a
yeah,
really great sort of a legacy long tail
yeah,
kind of a thing that
yeah,
the first guy who saw something in you probably won't even know how that impacts somebody 10 years from now still. You see what
yeah,
I'm saying?
yeah.
I think that's
Paying it forward is critically important to me. I am
yeah,
not doing anything today for money. I'm doing it because I want to help
yeah.
others in our industry. It's the most underserved industry from people who want to help. Um, Most people are only focused on what's it pay, and I really am. I'm really hyper focused on um, making sure that there's an impact with everybody I touch, because our industry is starving, literally starving. It's dying, frankly, from folks that are only interested. It has such a narcissistic behavior. They're only interested in what's the commission, what's it pay, what's in it for me. And you can't get anywhere in this world today unless you're paying it forward and helping somebody achieve their goals. Because my
Are
goals,
you
my
seeing
goals
that?
are, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, are you seeing that? So you said a narcissistic kind of attitude. Are you seeing that strictly on the dealer side, or are you seeing that on the vendors who,
Both.
like TrueCar? Is it
Yeah.
both?
Both. It's more prevalent on the retail, in the retail ecosystem,
Mhm.
less prevalent in the vendor, but it's there. They're looking at it so that they can check off that they closed the account. They didn't check off that they helped that dealer achieve the common goal. And that's a lost art. And
Man, I can so relate to that.
mhm.
Just going back to my time at TrueCar,
Yeah,
one of
yeah,
the things that brought me personally the most satisfaction was knowing that I was going to go into that dealership, and a lot of times I had to change their mind about who TrueCar was and what they were bringing to the table.
right,
But I really felt like when I would leave there, I left there giving people practical things that they could do that's going to make their job, their life easier and better and so forth.
right.
In fact, one of the things that I've certainly got over the years from you, Ed, is your ability to take somewhat complex things, and we don't have to go into the details, but just between you and I, something like the cost of the chair,
Right,
the holding costs,
right,
things that aren't necessarily, maybe a lot of people don't think about it that way, and they also maybe don't do the math and all that. But it
right.
was so great to have you do all those things, and both of those things are just two of the things that I would use all the time when I'm talking to dealers, going, have you ever looked at it this way? This is,
Right.
so I think you do a very, you leave with practical things that they can start using right now, as opposed to going in there with some kind of a theory, like, well, work 10 times harder than everybody
Right.
else,
Yeah.
or that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Those are easy answers. The hard answers is to understand what it takes to actually move the needle.
Yeah. Well, I want to get into more about what you're doing currently with Auto Profit, but Carl, when he was kind of looking at your LinkedIn and kind of prepping for this, noticed that
Sure.
one of the dealership groups that you got an early start with is one that Carl knows real well, and that's the Rohrman Group.
Yeah, yeah. They were my second employer. I'd moved from the Buick store. I was actually offered a parts manager's role with the Rohrman organization in 1976. And Bob at that time had Toyota and AMC Jeep.
That was it?
That was it. That's all he had in 1976.
It's
He
slightly larger than that now.
acquired his first Honda store in 77. I'll never forget this. Carl, you'll like this story. The Honda rep comes to Indiana and offers the Honda store to the Chevrolet dealer, the Buick dealer that I was working for, the Oldsmobile dealer, the Ford dealer, and all of them turned it down and told him to go away. And he ends up at Bob's store, little Toyota store with a 1-car showroom and 4 sales offices. And of course, Bob says, sure, And about a month later, a semi truck, now he hadn't told anybody. He hadn't told anybody. He hadn't told Toyota. He hadn't told any employees. He hadn't told anybody. So a semi truck pulls up with, give or take, $50,000 worth of Honda parts, and I'm the parts manager. And I don't know if you've ever, I don't know if you remember how Bob talked, but he comes running into the parts department. Eddie, hide those parts. I don't want anybody to know. So I got to drag $50,000 worth of Honda parts upstairs, hide them, cover them with drop cloths, big old drop cloths. And 4 months later, we got Honda cars. And they just showed up. Nobody knew. Bob
What
was
year?
famous.
What year was this?
1977. That was his
Okay,
first
so
Honda
yeah,
store.
Honda was just kind of starting
Yeah.
to become something
Well,
that
yeah,
people
it had
were
the little
talking about.
Civic, right?
Yeah.
The Accord with a 3-door hatchback Accord. Civic was $3,000 and Accord was 3,800. It
Well,
was
and I
crazy.
think even Toyota at that time, neither one of those brands certainly have the reputation
Yeah.
and the
Oh
amount
yeah,
of
no.
business
In the
that
70s,
existed.
it was, can we get somebody to sell Toyotas?
Yeah.
Can we even get somebody to sell a Honda? Yeah.
Carl, how
And
long have you known the Rohrman Group?
What they were one of my first customers back in '93. So Randy Rohrman,
yeah, I know Randy.
Bob's, I don't know if he's the oldest or the middle kid, but
JR is the oldest. JR is 1 year younger than I am.
okay, so JR, who I still have yet to meet. I know his kids real well, and
yeah,
obviously
kids
his
are
brother,
running the place. Yeah.
his brother and sister. But yeah, so they were one of my first customers, and Randy was apparently sent up here to open Schaumburg Honda
Yeah.
when Bob got the Honda ticket
Yeah.
here, which is now one of the largest Honda dealers
Yeah.
in Illinois for sure, but maybe even the country.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was that was quite an education. I would submit to both of you that the Rohrman Group that you see today does not resemble any of the style that Bob ran it by. Bob was tough. Bob, I'll give you we had the blizzard of 78. This is another great story.
Okay.
Blizzard of 78. We got snow in the Midwest, like the National Guard is called out. It's 10 feet deep. There's blizzard warnings everywhere. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. Now, by this time, I've been promoted to service and parts manager. So he put me on a fast track. This is before cell phones. So my home phone rings. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. I answer it. It's Bob. Eddie, look out your window. I said, Bob, it's snowing. I can see it. He goes, God damn it, I know that. Go into the dealership and start plowing. You can't even move your car.
Yeah.
I got a 78 Grand Cherokee, one of those old boxes. And then he makes me go out and pick up every employee that was on salary because he didn't want them to get away with a day's pay.
Oh,
You
man.
can't make that kind of stuff up. He
Well,
was relentless. But I
well, and
would
look
tell
at
you,
the empire
Stan,
that he did build, though, you
yeah,
know?
he taught me a lot. He taught me a lot about the details. He knew the answer to every question before he asked it. He knew his numbers backwards. That's where I got my numbers from. He knew his numbers backwards, forwards, sideways. He knew every answer to every metric and taught me that. He's not one of the three, but he gave me an education of discipline in retail automotive that I'm forever grateful for. Now, there's some things that I would tell you that I did in my retail life the exact opposite of what he did. People
Yeah.
management was his biggest downfall. I mean, we'd pick
Yeah.
out 5 people on Christmas Eve to fire.
Oh, man. Ruthless.
Just, I mean, just ruthless,
Yeah.
but a good businessman,
Yeah. Oh, he built a
phenomenal
heck of an
education.
empire. I got
Yeah,
to tell you, my experience with the Rorman Group is back when I was doing trainings all over the country. My biggest challenge when I would go to any dealership is I knew I could make an impact if I was training the
yeah,
sales team or the BDC department, but I knew I could really make some changes if I could get the general manager, if I could get management
yeah,
to come in for that hour. Now
yeah,
we're really making progress. So that was always a challenge. And uh, Ryan Rorman saw me do my presentation,
sure.
and it was one of the best training opportunities that I had because now I have a dealer principal who
Right.
is making sure everybody's there, everybody's paying attention, everybody's following along, and it was super effective. And I was just very impressed with Ryan.
Mhm.
You know, I think he's a grandson, correct, of
He's the
Bob?
grandson. Yeah, he actually skipped a generation. Bob fired JR, his oldest son, who's a year younger than me, about 28 times. And Randy quit every couple of years and would go out and do something else. And there's 5 kids. Rhonda, who is the oldest daughter, was the apple of Bob's eye. But the good news is that their company is in great hands with the grandkids.
Okay.
And he left. Bob was smart enough to set it up for it to be a ongoing concern. There's a lot of those stores that are closely held companies like that with estate taxes and some of those things have to be liquidated. He set it up so that it didn't have to be, and the success is in the grandkids' hands. And God bless them. I'm forever grateful. I just know that what they identify themselves with today and how it was built, uh, pretty diametrically opposed.
Yeah.
I'll just
Well,
leave it
they're
at
doing a
that.
great job.
Yeah, they are.
So
Yeah, can't take that away from them.
I want to
Hey,
get back now to you went
quick
to
question for you.
oh,
Can
go
I
ahead, Carl.
jump in, Stan, real quick?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Ed, because you said something earlier before we jumped down the Rorman rabbit hole, which was super um, encouraging to me because that's what we're hoping to do on this channel, right? Is pay it forward.
Yeah.
Stan and I have been in automotive so many years like you that we're trying to at least start with in these initial conversations with people like yourself who have years and years and years of experience in
Right.
life and in automotive to share
Right.
to our listeners, to the audience, and then just give back. So because this
Right.
stuff, once we get our nuggets of this conversation and
Yeah.
your words of wisdom and all that stuff, it's just going to be out there for people to consume and digest and share with others. And
Right.
hopefully today, so I'm glad you said that. Like we're this is a passion project for us. Stan and I aren't making any money on this deal, and
Sure.
nor are you. But just to hear still the energy that you have and the passion of giving back and paying forward is really, really profound. So thank you.
Thank you. You bet.
All right. So Ed, I want to kind of fast forward a little bit. I know how you got your start now, and then you went into management. You've been a general manager at dealerships. You've been a dealer principal, which
Yeah.
for people not in the automobile industry, that's the person who owns the dealership. Do you
Right.
still have your independent lot in Indianapolis?
No, I've divested that.
Okay.
And in anticipation as I'm winding down my career.
Yeah.
It just made sense for me to have less to focus on, and frankly, it was we needed to do a facility action and a couple of other things, and it became the timing was right for me to exit all of the retail things and just remain focused on what I've got my plate completely full with, which is clients across the country that seek me out for help in several different areas of their operation, whether it be human capital or inventory distribution or efficiency management. So that's what I've done, Stan. Is
Yeah.
about 3 years ago, I divested everything.
I mean, I know you mostly from what you're doing now, but it just seems like this is really your passion, and certainly you're kind of tailor made for this. And I'm sure all the other things that you did got you to this point. Auto Profit, what, about 14 years you've been
Yes,
doing that?
2011.
Okay.
I exited partnerships in 5 locations and decided that I was going to quote semi-retire. And
How's that working out for you?
well, it worked out for about 90 days, and I was living in Florida at the time, and I bought like 3 boats and played as much tennis as I could possibly play. And my wife said, you're driving everybody crazy. Why don't you go find something to do? And I didn't want to work in the electrical department at Home Depot. So, I thought, well, okay, I'll call a few of my friends and see if I can help them with their stores. And so it again happened innocently and just sort of morphed into what it is today, where I'm actually working on both sides. I'm working with vendors that serve the industry and working with dealer clients that are in the industry. So, and I grew it, not because I wanted to, but I haven't advertised. It's word of mouth.
Yeah.
But I've trimmed it down recently, Stan. I've sort of right sized it in anticipation of riding off into the sunset in the next 3 or 4 years anyway.
Sure. Well, and what you and I talked a couple weeks ago, you had said something that I thought was pretty profound, is now you're being a little more selective about the dealers you're working with. And if I might not be quoting you perfectly, but you're wanting to work with the dealers who want your help and are going to listen and follow through, as opposed to going in there. Cause sometimes you've got great things to tell somebody, but it just doesn't sink in.
Well, when you're not worried about the money and you're only worried about the outcome, you become pretty focused on are they picking up what you're putting down, so to speak.
Sure.
And if they're not, I keep joking with everybody, but I'm in the fourth quarter. I'm damn near at the 2-minute warning. So if they're not listening, I don't have much more time to tell somebody else. So you gotta sort of pick up quickly. Are they really interested in succeeding and taking what and are convinced and convicted? And I've got thousands of success stories where what I'm giving them is not bad advice. And when someone pays me and then they don't do anything that I've encouraged them to do, it's essentially stealing. So, and I don't want to steal from anybody. So I just assume not have the money as to not have them do what they know are the right things to do. So
you want them
that's
to
why I've
accept that value. Yeah,
exactly.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
I know you've helped lots and lots of dealers. You and I got to know each other when you were consultant on the vendor side at
Right.
TrueCar.
Right.
And you just brought so many insights to all of us. Some of the things I've already mentioned, and your way of taking somewhat complex concepts and making it so other guys like me could share that with dealers, and it made sense. One of the things that I was really proud of you for is, people not in the automobile industry, the granddaddy of all the trade shows is the NADA, National Automobile Dealers Association. It's the biggest trade show of the year.
Right.
And many times there's speakers there. And from what I understand, a lot of times some of the speakers sort of pay their way into getting to be a speaker there because it helps promote whatever they're doing. But my friend Ed French, I think it was 2 years ago, you were invited to speak by NADA.
Yeah.
And the only thing that bummed me out is by the time I left the booth and got over there, I couldn't get in the room. The place was
Yeah.
packed.
Yeah, I was in Dallas. I had a standing room only. They actually put an overflow upstairs. It was in a meeting room that was in the lower level. I had over 700 people in attendance for my session. That's one of those things where when you're invited by what I believe is the 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 phenomenal institution that NADA is. It's the voice of the dealers. When you're invited to speak, and your agenda is not product driven, or it's driven to give easy takeaways. My subject matter was how to become a more effective general manager, the day in the life of, so to speak, and what are the things that you focus on as a general manager. And it was well attended, and I've had hundreds of emails, phone calls over time, wanting more information, wanting me to come out to their stores. And I've actually developed an online workshop for that, Stan, where I actually have online learning for incoming general managers to help them become successful. Stan, it's interesting. Most managers in retail automotive are battlefield promoted. We fired Carl. You're up.
Yep.
And the only point of reference that you as a new manager have is from the guy that got fired. And so many times I see managers just do the same thing that got the other guy fired. And then they wonder why they get fired too. And so we end up recycling all these people instead of actually breaking that chain and actually giving a new manager a clean pathway for success. And that's what I was focused on with my workshop. And that's what I've been focused on with both middle managers, general managers, trying to, there's a new generation of general managers, and they have to recognize how important the business behind the business is. It's more than just selling cars. There's a business behind our business that you got to pay attention to.
Right. So when towards the end of my time at TrueCar, you and I were working, we were coming out of the weird COVID thing, which just changed the automobile industry so significantly.
Right.
But you and I were talking and basically developing something that we were calling, is your dealership retail ready?
Yeah.
And the whole genesis behind this was during COVID, you didn't have to really do much because there weren't very many cars to be sold. All you had to do was unlock the doors. And so a lot of people kind of lost their drive and lost their skill sets and stuff like that. What's your feelings on that now, Ed? It's been a few years since then. Are more dealers retail ready again?
Yes and no.
Okay.
There was a period of time from 23 to 24 where most of the retail network was in complete denial. Boy, we sure wish we could go back and get those great big grosses we had and make all that net profit. And the managers were paid twice as much as they should be because the pay plans were not commensurate with what a regular retail environment would be. And so we spent 12 months in denial. At the end of 23, we sort of got a pretty substantial wake-up call because the market made a big adjustment. And that caused dealers to do two things. One is adjust pay plans, and the other one was adjust the people's behavior, so to speak, going into 24. There were lots of managers that lost their role in a store because they didn't adjust their behavior to get back in front of. They were not acting, they were reacting, and it was too late. Studying the market and studying the trends is critical to the success of any manager. And a lot of them just kept wanting it to go back to where we were in COVID. That's like, if you're surfing, that's like 100-year wave. We caught it once. The chances of it coming back are zero. We had to get back into we've had business pretty regular with whether it's inflation or interest rates or whatever for over 100 years. We had 2 years out of 100 where, it was irregular. Well, we can't make irregular our business model. We've got to
Yeah.
make regular our business
You
model.
can wish for it all you want. It's
Yeah.
not coming back, but be grateful that you had it when you had
Yeah, it
it.
was great. You got a
I,
pool
I
and
think some of
a new house. Great. But what are you going to do now? So
yeah.
I would say in answer to your question, yes and no. I'd say we're about 75% back. There is
Okay.
still 25% that we have lost what I call the edge. The edge is when we are disciplined enough to actually work within our business with productive KPIs that we've got to achieve, where we are coming to work to work.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of coming to work to figure out an easier way to do it. One of the enablers of that is software. You know, we as retail dealers have bought so much software and stacked it on top of each other that it's almost become, it looks like, you know, I look at car dealerships and I ask them just had a new client stand. I asked him for his list of software vendors. It's 2 pages long.
Oh man.
I said, you got to
Like
be
a
kidding me,
spaghetti
dude.
bowl.
Yeah. I said, you know, how much of this are you actually using? He said, I don't really know. I know that we need it all. I said, okay, well, you know, needing it all, wanting it all, and using it all are 3 different things.
Uh-huh.
But we become dependent on software. And what I sense is if we had software that was more directional towards retail sales, as opposed to more directional relative to data dump or making us feel good about what we're doing, we'd be a lot better off.
Yeah.
So,
You said something just a minute ago about, you know, being aware of your industry and paying attention to business behind the business, but wouldn't you agree that that's not just the car business? That advice could really translate into just about any business I can think of. Would you
any
agree?
business, yeah. I don't care if
Yeah.
you're in the ice cream business or the car business or the hardware business or whatever business you're in, if you're not paying attention. I spend somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 hours a day studying industry trends. Now, I've got a little extra time, but you could condense it down to an hour a day, and it's the best hour a day you'd ever spend.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it at 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning before the world starts turning. But it sure tells you a lot about what's going on. And you can be ahead and make conscious decisions to improve somebody's business by knowing what's actually happening, as opposed to going, OMG, that's happening. Oh, I better do something about it. Got to be, the world's working too fast. We got to stay ahead of it.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That's the perfect segue because this is what drives you. And we wanted to talk about what got you to where you are in life. But I can't help it just to go back to old times, Ed. We'll do just a little bit of editorial here, if you don't mind.
Okay, let's
So,
do it.
well, we don't have to go into great detail, but we've already kind of touched on this a little bit. But what's your thoughts on the automobile industry? What are some of the key things that either dealers need to be thinking about? And if someone's in the market to buy a car, do you have anything that you see coming? Like, are prices ever going to come back to what used to be normal? Is it going to continue to rise? What's your thoughts?
Okay, I'll start with pricing. Pricing with the current model lineup and content will not recede. So the average transaction price for new is touching 50 grand. Last month it was 49.5, something like that. What you're going to see going forward, Stan, are decontented vehicles, basic vehicles that will begin to provide basic transportation, not content laden, that will begin to fit in the price range of more affordable vehicles for consumers as we go forward. So there'll be tiers of new vehicles. I predict this will happen by 2028, 2029. You know, Bezos is in the midst of making a pickup truck that'll sell for 25 grand. It's roll-up windows, it's basic, it's electric. And he's just one of many. There are, all of these cars are on the drawing boards. You've just got to figure out what is the least amount of content you can get by. So in other words, content created price increases. You know, we got to have leather, we got to have roof, we got to have nav, we got to have this, we got to have that, we got to have this suspension package. And yeah, there's labor costs included in that, but the OEMs have content laden these vehicles to the point where there's going to have to be another tier. You'll see brands sprout up out of the ground that will be your basic content vehicles, which will drive the aggregate price down. It's not going to happen right away. Like I said, 28, 29, probably the
It's just
closest.
crazy that we're the thought of paying $50,000 for a basic car. Not, I mean, we do have a lot of bells and whistles, as you
Yeah.
just said, but that's just astounding to me.
Well, the wages haven't kept up with it. And the unfortunate thing is we've about stretched out the amount of term that a lender will loan on a vehicle. You know, when the average loan term is now 77 months for a new vehicle, and payments are north of, I just read yesterday, Stan, the average payment last month on a new car was $742. That's average, you know.
I'm going to continue driving my Tundra until the wheels
Yeah,
fall off. That's
keep
all there
going,
is to it.
Stan. Yeah.
It's still great. About to hit 200,000 miles on that truck, Ed.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
On the used car side, you'll continue to see demand increase, availability decrease, because we lost production in 2021 and 22. So you're seeing lease returns being scarce. People are keeping their vehicles longer. We're going to see the average age of vehicle and the mileage of vehicles increase. The average age of a vehicle is 14 years old on the road today. I predict that in the next 36 months, that could touch 18 or 19 years old, just because we're keeping them longer and we keep recycling them, because frankly, they're built very well. These cars are not like the cars I sold. These cars are built to sustain this. I think the EV market is it's wonderful to think that we could potentially have in the 20% share. Unfortunately, we don't have an infrastructure to support charging. So, until an infrastructure is built to support charging, you'll see that in the 10 to 12% range. You'll see
If that's going to happen, Ed, who's going to be responsible building that infrastructure? Is it going to be a government thing, or is it going to be the dealers who have to do it?
No, you've got to have the municipalities are going to have to get behind it. We're going to have some sort of special taxation if we want to build a grid that's going to support charging nationwide. It's just we don't
That's
have
a
the
big
ability.
tax.
Yeah, and that's the reason why. Range anxiety is the number one reason consumers choose ICE over electric. They got range anxiety.
Yeah.
So it's great
Most
to have
days
it.
I could get by with an electric truck, but what about the days where I do need to drive to Dallas and back or something like that? That's the thing that's kept me from really seriously considering one so far.
Yeah.
Carl, do you have any questions for
I want to
Ed?
add one more thing. Parts and
please.
service is going to be huge. The repair business is going to skyrocket over the next 3 years.
Because people are keeping these older cars.
Yep. You're going to see, last year, franchise stores did $156 billion in sales in parts and service as a franchise dealer group. 156 billion. That's a big business.
That's a big business.
Yeah.
Carl, I don't know if you have any questions for Ed about the industry. Carl's been in the business most of his life too. Any questions pop into your mind while you got the auto profit on?
Yeah. I just thank you again for your knowledge and paying attention. I obviously can tell you're a lifelong learner, and again, that's part of this channel is educate. We have the 3 E's, which are entertain, educate, and encourage. And you are definitely in the education bucket. But I'm also encouraged because I think 2 things I want to touch on with you that I wrote down, but then the one coming off this EVs. I am not a believer in EVs solely. I think we dabbled a little bit in hybrid. We've got some, but why do you think we just jumped right over, like experimenting with the hybrid and went straight EV when everyone and their brother, including you and me and Stan, knew and everybody out there, I mean, kids knew, like, we don't have the infrastructure for this. Why do you think that happened?
One simple answer. We were enamored as a country with Tesla and the success that it had. And there was trillions of dollars available in the money marketplace because of what they saw as an opportunity to replicate the Tesla stock. And so consequently, and the government at that time, the administration, saw where they could make a green initiative. They had lots of people saying, yep, you pass this. You mandate that we've all got to be EVs by X date, and we'll invest and we'll get behind it and we'll build factories because the money was available, because we all wanted to replicate what was happening with Tesla. At that time, if you remember, Carl, I mean, Tesla was trading at $800 a share. And when you take something from 0 to 800 a share, and you see all of the money, this was a money decision, but it was also driven by an administration that was trying to put a stake in the ground for a green initiative. And so we jumped over hybrid, and we jumped over hydrogen, and we jumped over all the right things to get to this end result, because we all wanted $800 a share. GM's trading today at 38. Wait a minute, how come we can't trade at 800 a share? And so that's what happened in my mind. I know that's a simple answer. It seems simplistic, but it's the reality. We were enamored by what one particular person did with a startup.
Yeah. No, and I agree with that. And I think too, it's a shame because with the hybrids, you take away that anxiety, right?
Right.
And there's some amazing stuff that can be done.
Yep.
And I think it's almost like a rollback. Hey, all this stuff we learned with this EV technology, let's downsize a little bit, attach it to an ICE, which we've already got billions invested in that technology. Let's marry those two. And guess what?
Yep.
Now we got the perfect solution, and we don't have to spend trillions on the grid. So, yeah.
It's interesting. Toyota stood by the sidelines and watched all this unfold. Didn't jump into all electric, didn't do anything, didn't make any big announcements, and stayed focused on hybrids. Who looks like the smartest company in the room right now? They do.
Yeah.
And yet Ford jump off and build a big plant in Tennessee for electrics, and Hyundai went crazy, and everybody went crazy, and Toyota stood by and goes, no. And you can pretty much benchmark what they do as their ability to make great decisions for the long-term value of their company. I don't know that you'd bet against that, would you?
No, it's interesting.
I'm a fan.
Yeah, stands a life for Toyota truck guy. It's interesting because I work with some big groups in my day job, and one of them, to both your guys' points, is Camping World, and they just said, listen, all industries have outpriced the normal buyer, so they have come out with this and rebranded their own entry level tow behind for $99.95 because they think that payment has to be $200 or less to get people into RVing, which is brilliant, right?
It's brilliant. Mm-hmm.
And so that bucket of payment, and just all these companies getting rid of their entry level cars. It's like I've got a 24-year-old and 28-year-old. How in the world do they buy a $50,000 car?
They don't, is the answer. Mm-hmm. That's why there's going to be there'll be new brands come up, and there'll be this segment that will absolutely exist in the next 36 months. I'm convinced of it, Carl.
Well, and it's sad. Before I worked at TrueCar, I worked at a Nissan dealership. Mm-hmm. May they almost rest in peace.
They're getting closer by the day.
But I was a used car director, and what was brilliant about Nissan at that era was the Sentra always had a rebate on it, and it was always under 20 grand, the base one. So anybody who came in looking for a used car who I couldn't place, I would say, hey, look, go talk to my new car partner. We got the Sentra. It's a rebate. It's a great payment. It's a good interest rate. And it was just this used car alternative that it doesn't exist today.
It does not exist at any level anywhere. It will, but you're right, Carl. That's what we're missing in the marketplace.
Yeah. So
I just found it interesting, Ed, that you said someone's going to be making an electric truck with roll-up windows. That just seems
it's called the Scout. It's called the Scout. It's backed by Bezos. It's going to be assembled in the United States. It's a regular cab, short bed, electric truck, very basic. Going to sell for 25 grand.
Nice.
Wait, Ed, is that the Scout or the Slate?
Slate. I'm sorry, Slate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
the Slate. Yeah.
Because I got my deposit on a Scout.
Yeah,
It's a
Scout to
hybrid.
VW, right. Yeah, no, Slate. But
Yeah.
it's going to change the marketplace.
Yeah, I saw that. It looks pretty
Mhm.
amazing. So
Yep.
my two questions that I had that I think are
Sure.
just again super uh unique to you. You've taken So question number one is you've taken your 40 plus years experience, 50 plus years of experience,
Right.
and figured out how at age, the ripe old age or yet ripe young age of 71, how to monetize that experience via speaking, consulting, and all that. Tell us a
Right.
little bit how that, and I know you say you're not in it for the money, but you've been able to take that experience, which I think a lot of us want to do, is how do I get out? Because that's the blessing and the curse of the car business. It's easy barrier to entry, but you start getting a taste of the money in this business, and you're like, man, how do I get out? Because these hours are killing me. So you were able to do that, monetize your experience.
Right.
And then question number two is how in the world does a publicly traded company in Rainbow Tree Hug in California, TrueCar, find Ed French in the middle of Indiana or wherever you were at that time and say, hey, come help us? That to me is an amazing thing.
There's one word answer to both those questions. It's network. If you haven't built your own personal network and have your own personal connections, you're destined to never get out of where you are. If you want to do what I'm doing, you have to have a network. And that's exactly what happened to me. That's how my first vendor experience in 2011 was with Auto Trader. And one of the folks in my network um, gave my name to one of the higher level managers at Auto Trader. And I started with a 30-day engagement at a vastly reduced price to give them some intelligence on a trade-in tool because they had nobody within their company that was aware of the trade-in tool. And I took that engagement and treated it as if it was my only thing I was going to focus on 24/7 for 30 days. And then gave my network of people, connections, the experience of socializing that before social network. This was 2011. I did that before social network was fashionable, was out telling everybody, hey, this is something you need to take a look at, and on and on. And it turned into that. And so I'm answering the question, what's your brand and what's your network of connections? And if you haven't got at least 7,500 LinkedIn connections, and if you are not in the marketplace professing something other than selling something, professing to help others, you'll win. And so the simple answer, Carl, is I had a network and I used it.
Would another word for that be relationships, Ed?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Well, listen, we've had you for a long time here. Carl, do you want to ask the three questions or would you like me to do it?
Sure, no, I will. It's funny that you say that, Ed, because I was looking at LinkedIn this morning doing a prep, and you and I have 542 mutual
Yeah. See, there you go.
connections.
Yeah. Yeah. There you
So,
go. Yeah.
yeah, I'm a big believer in that. That's my whole life. I've
Yep.
always been the guy. A lot of my friends call me the connector, like I'm the common
Right.
thread.
Mhm. Yep.
But I
Yep.
take a lot away from
Mhm.
veterans like you and just looking at who and not for personal gain or monetary gain. It's just I never know when someone's going to have a problem that I
Right.
can't solve that you can or Stan can. Do you know what I'm saying?
I've never said no to anybody that's called me, and I've never said, how much do you want to pay me to answer the question?
Yeah.
Those are two things I'll never do.
All right. So question number
Here we
one
go.
in the car in our speed round here. What was your
Okay.
first car?
1954 Chevrolet.
Race car? Drag car?
Turned it into that. It didn't start out that way.
And what was because you must have owned a lot after running all these dealerships, what was your favorite car?
Well, they were all, that's a little hard for me because I'm less emotional about cars. They've at one point in my life, they were just metal I sold for money. But I've become slightly more emotional about them lately. Lamborghini Countach sat in my garage for a while. 85, one of 20 in a color that was not red or black. And so I would say out of all the cars that I've owned, have opening the garage and having a Countach in your garage that you can take out on a Sunday morning was probably one of my all-time favorites.
When it started.
The good news is at that point in time, I owned a couple of stores and I had a guy that I personally took under my wing to help me keep it going. So yes, the answer is yes. But what if it ran, Carl? It ran.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
they're
yeah.
fun. They're fun. And then what is your dream car?
Rolls-Royce Cullinan.
Right. Now,
Too late.
our last question, which we kind of always love to end with, and you've shared a ton of nuggets along the way, so thank you, is what we call words of wisdom, kind of a wow question. And that would be, what would you tell 14-year-old Ed or 18-year-old Ed or just any younger person listening, like, hey, and it doesn't need to be a novel, and as Stan alluded to earlier, sometimes it's just as simple. We had one that was just be humble, right? Be kind. Stan's was, begin, just get started. So what would you tell somebody or wish someone would have told you when you were just starting out?
Never take a job for money.
I think that's been kind of your theme of this whole interview. So good way to finish things up. Ed, man, we've taken up a whole lot of your time, and as always, it's appreciated. And it's always a good time when you and I get to
I loved it, Stan. You were great.
talk
Thank you,
about
Carl.
things.
Love being with Carl too. It was great.
All right. You guys, thank you so much for joining us on this edition of What Drives You. We will see you all on the next edition. Thanks again, Ed. Carl.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.